This wasn't random. Something strange happens in certain relationships. The people are different. The stories are different. But the emotional pattern is almost identical. At first, everything feels unusually intense. Attention appears quickly. Understanding feels precise. Sometimes it feels almost improbable, as if the other person somehow knows exactly how to stand near your doubts. Not too far, not too close, just close enough to feel rare. And then something small changes, not enough to clearly explain, but enough to notice. The change. A slight withdrawal, a moment of confusion, a reaction that seems out of proportion to what happened. Suddenly, you begin doing something you did not expect. You start analyzing things: tone, timing, messages, silence. And at some point, a strange realization appears. This feels familiar, but the person is new. So the real question becomes, what exactly is repeating? The first clue: rhythm. The first clue is not behavior, it is rhythm. Most people imagine manipulation as obvious control, but in reality, it often begins with something quieter. Attention. Not ordinary attention, precise attention, the kind that feels almost tailored to your psychology. Someone remembers small details. Someone responds with unusual focus. Someone appears emotionally present in a way that feels rare. At this stage, nothing feels wrong. In fact, it feels unusually promising. But the nervous system is already learning something important: a rhythm, attention, closeness, recognition. And rhythms are powerful, because the nervous system does not learn relationships through analysis first. It learns them through patterns: distance, return, expression, silence. Long before the mind understands a relationship, the body has already begun mapping its rhythm. The second clue: the shift. Then the second clue appears. Something shifts, but not dramatically. Manipulation rarely enters dramatically. It arrives in fragments. A small guilt where none was needed. A moment of distance after closeness. A reaction that quietly moves responsibility toward you. Individually, these moments are easy to dismiss, but something subtle begins changing inside the interaction. You start adjusting yourself. You explain more. You clarify more. You monitor reactions more carefully. And this adjustment happens quietly. So quietly that it can feel like simple effort, but effort changes something important in a relationship. It changes balance. The third clue: identity. The third clue is rarely noticed at first, because it is not about the other person. It is about you, who you become around them. You begin thinking ahead of conversations. You replay moments after they end. You begin measuring honesty by how carefully it must be delivered. At some point, something subtle happens. The relationship stops feeling like simple contact and begins feeling like management. You are not only interacting anymore. You are stabilizing the interaction, predicting moods, reducing tension, avoiding reactions. And when this happens, something deeper may already be repeating. What is actually repeating? Because repetition in manipulative relationships is often misunderstood. People assume they are repeating a person, but most of the time they are repeating something else. A state. Waiting for warmth. Interpreting distance. Feeling relief when tension disappears. Monitoring emotional signals. This state becomes familiar to the nervous system, and familiarity can feel strangely similar to attraction. Not because the person is right, but because the pattern is already legible. The mind does not need to work hard to interpret it. It has seen this rhythm before. The nervous system problem. This reveals a difficult psychological truth. The mind is not always searching for safety. Very often, it is searching for familiarity, even when familiarity once included pain, because the nervous system asks a different question than the conscious mind. It does not ask, "Is this healthy?" It asks, "Have I felt this before?" If closeness once included uncertainty, uncertainty can later feel intimate. If affection once arrived mixed with pressure, pressure can begin resembling importance. If connection once required emotional effort, effort itself can start feeling like proof of love. And once these associations exist, the pattern no longer needs the same person, only the same emotional geometry. The hidden trap. There is another reason these patterns repeat: unfinished meaning. When manipulative relationships end, they rarely end cleanly. Questions remain. Why did they change? What did they actually feel? Which moments were real? Which were not? The relationship ends, but the puzzle remains active, and the mind has a strange tendency, when puzzles remain unresolved. It looks for similar pieces again. Not always to repeat the experience, sometimes to finally understand it, but that search can quietly recreate the same environment, because the mind becomes unusually attentive to familiar signals. Mixed messages, emotional contradictions, moments of warmth followed by distance. Attention sharpens around these signals, and that sharp attention can look very similar to emotional importance. Recognition. This is often the moment repetition becomes visible, not because the other person reveals themselves, but because something about the interaction feels strangely known. Not identical, but adjacent. A slightly different tone. A slightly different personality. A slightly different story. But the internal experience remains the same. You begin adapting around them. You begin carrying emotional responsibility that was never clearly assigned. You begin feeling a quiet exhaustion after moments that looked ordinary from the outside. And that exhaustion is often the clearest signal, because it reveals how much of the relationship is being processed beneath the surface. Conclusion. What makes repetition so confusing is that it rarely announces itself as repetition. It feels like chemistry. It feels like intensity. It feels like something meaningful is happening. But sometimes intensity is not depth. Sometimes intensity is recognition. The nervous system responding to a pattern it already knows how to read, and when that realization finally appears, another question begins to form. Not why this person felt familiar, but why familiarity itself felt trustworthy. Because if repetition begins before recognition, then the beginning of the pattern may exist much earlier than the relationship itself. And if that is true, what looks like several separate relationships may actually be one continuous design. A design the mind has been following long before it knew how to see it.
I'm Oliver, and now you know why this happens. Or at least a part of it.